And we now have a question from Myezu Ishmael. Myezu, thank you so much for this question. I'm going to do it now. I hope you're watching. The figure says, in this diagram, we have the function f of x, which is that function over there. Let us just write, we've got the equation, let's just underline it. So that will be the function f. Okay, this is f. Okay, let me change that color, folks. You might just not see it properly. Let's just go and make it blue for now. Okay, so we're making that blue. When we write on the y, on the white, I forgot, folks, that you might not just see that. Okay, and then h of x is the other graph, the one that lies over there, and they told us that that is a cosine curve. Then they say it's sketched for the interval minus 180 to 180, fine. A is the point, this is the point, minus 135 degrees and -1, and that is a minimum point on the graph. C up here is the point 45 and 1. Now don't forget degree signs. That's a maximum point. And then they tell us that the two graphs over here intersect at the point 165 and -0.5. Okay, so we know at least now what the coordinate pairs are of three of the points on the graph. Now they ask us, the first question, write down the period of f, okay? So the period of the graph, the sine of 2x. What is that period? Well, usually in your head you're going to say, 2x is equal to 360 divided by 2, and the period is 180 degrees. So this is what happens in your head. 2x is 360 because the period for sine is 360 divided by 2, and you get the actual period for the graph, which is 180 degrees for 1 mark. Now they're asking us to find the x coordinate for point B that lies over here. It's where these two curves are indeed crossing one another. Now, folks, yes, you can say that those two curves cut each other there and solve them simultaneously if you want to. Okay, but the clever thing here is to use the symmetry in the graphs. They are only asking for the x value. This graph intersects at B and at D. Now, if I draw a line that goes to the x-axis, this is 165. It is 15 degrees away from that intercept at 180. Okay, so what does that mean? It means here it will again be 15 degrees away from the 90. And please note that this is a 1 mark answer. If this was a 7 to an 8 mark answer, then I would say, yes, go ahead and solve them simultaneously. It is for 1 mark. You don't want to do too much work. So you're going to say immediately for part B, the x coordinate for point B will be minus 90. Now look at how I'm going to write this. And I'm going to go 15 to the right, so plus 15. And if you use not your calculator, you should be able to do this. It will give you a result of minus 75 degrees for the x coordinate of that point. Okay, let me just see if we've got all our answers on here. Yes, there we go. Now for part C. Now this is beautiful. What they've done in part C, before I do it, is they've mixed it up a little bit for us, folks. They took the graphs, and I thought they were going to do this when I read the question. If we go back to the original graphs, we can see here we have a double angle, and there we have a compound angle. So what the examiners, or what people usually do, us as teachers, is we camouflage the graphs in an equation. like they did here. Look at what they asked us. And this is for 5 marks. They say in the third part of this question, use your graphs to solve 2 sine x multiplied by the cosine of x less than equal to 1 over root 2 cos x plus sine x. For the interval over which we are working. Okay, now if they say use your graph, then certainly you will agree with me, folks, that those 2 equations must represent what is on your graph. Okay? If I was setting this question, I would have made it a tad bit more difficult. I would have multiplied this root 2 here. Let me do that in yellow. I would have taken the root 2 and put it in here. So this would have read 2 root 2 sine da 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 less than equal to cos x plus sine x. Why am I doing that? Because, folks, you need to recall that the cosine of 45 and the sine of 45 are both equal to each other and are equal to either root 2 over 2, depending on whose book you read, or the simplified version of that is 1 over root 2, which is what they gave us in this equation. Okay, so for the 5 marks here, we are going to first of all say, okay, we know what that is. That is the sine of 2x. So voila, I've got my graph there. Okay, this is less than equal to, now there's a little bit of work to do here. We know that this 1 over root 2 can represent the cosine of 45 degrees, and it can also represent the sine of 45 degrees, which is indeed what we need to fiddle with on this side, folks, so we can create the graph. Let's remind ourselves what that graph is. That graph is the cos of x minus 45. Okay, so let's play around with that. That is less than equal to, I'm going to make this cos 45. Now, some of you might ask me, but why didn't you make that sine 45? Well, the question has cos x minus 45. Okay, so I've got to have cos, cos, sine, sine, compound angle. If it was sine, cos, cos, sine, so it was the sine of 45 minus x, then I would have sine, cos, cos, sine. Okay, so look at the question. The question is cosine, so you've got to rework this into cos, cos, sine, sine. So I'm going to say this is cos 45 times the cosine of x, so I'm multiplying it into the bracket at the same time. On this side, I'm going to be clever and use it as the sine of 45 and the sine of x. Okay, so all that I need to remember now, and that you need to remember, is your compound angle formula. You have the cosine, cosine. So you know that this is going to be cosine of something. Well, it's going to be 45. And now you've got to look at the sine that's over here. Cosine of cosine, cosine, sine, sine. We use the opposite of that sign. So in our bracket, we'll have minus x. Now let's see if that is what we wanted. Yes, we've got the 2x over there, and we've got the x minus 45. So what is this question actually asking us? This is now the third phase in this question. They're saying, use your graph to find the values of x for which the sine of 2x is less than equal to the cosine of 45 minus x. Now, in plain English, folks, I'm going to translate. This means it is below. Below what? Well, the graph f, which is this graph, must lie below the graph of g. That's what they're asking us to look at. If something is bigger than, it's above in terms of graphs. So where is sine below cosine? Well, there goes the sine graph. It is above. Here's the cosine graph. Okay, so there goes the sine graph. it is above the cosine graph, which is down here. Now the sine graph lies below the cosine graph. At that point, they equal, but if you go beyond that point, the sine graph is still remaining below the cosine graph up to the point here at D. Okay, and that there at the top is your cosine graph. Okay, so let's see. Seems like it's between minus 135 and 165. That's perfect. That's all we have to say. Because it's less and equal to. If it was strictly less than, then we have to break it up here at point C, folks. Then we would say, oh, beautiful, this is 45 degrees. So we are looking at between 135 negative up to 45, and then continuing after that from 45 to 165, excluding the point at 45. Okay, so it will be strictly bigger than and less than, bigger than and less than. Or you could say from B to C, but excluding, from B here to D, but excluding this point. That's not what we want to do because we're including the point. So it's between 135, so x is bigger and equal to minus 135 and smaller and equal to 165 degrees. That is where this is happening, folks. That is why this is for a little bit more than what we usually give for a question like this, is because we fiddled with identities and we moved away from how the graph is represented in mathematical terms. Okay, so be aware of that. The previous one here as well. Folks, you would have wasted an enormous amount of time with question B if you wanted to solve the two equations. If you wanted to say that the sine of 2x is equal to the cosine of 45 minus x, there's nothing wrong with that. You can do it, but not for 1 mark. You need that time to spend on your geometry.